So here we are on the second turn of ideology, and I've played out up through the development phase. And, you know, people drew cards, maybe made some discards, try to balance their hands. Still nobody bought any cards, but we see the imperialists expanding towards that 4. The fascists are already there, and the Islamicists have done the same. At this point, we get to see what the next unaligned is, and that's going to be Alaska, which is adjacent to Russia, and nothing else except Canada. Nothing else that's in play currently. This gives Russia a bonus, but they played all their cards. Too bad. There's still 3 players holding some interest in either influencing whatever came up, but not the imperialists, who also had a bonus towards getting into a 1 valued region. Ooh. See, the US could have expanded this if they had the right cards. They didn't. But anyway, so this could be available. Basically, it's going to cost a distance cost to anybody who's going to try to take it. And it has to get 3 in order to actually be fully taken. You have to fill all its slots for it to actually become a controlled area. So we'll see if somebody goes for it or not. The US is going to be the first player in it. And what are they going to do with their cards if not? Well, they're at war with the Russians, and they might want to take aggressive action against really anyone, because they can even do cultural actions against the imperialists. So let's see what plays out, and we'll come back. Well, I lied. The Russians actually had a couple of cards. It's the Islamicists who were out, and they grabbed control of Alaska. The capitalists were able to play an economic using their innovation without paying the distance penalty, but the communists didn't have to pay distance penalty at all, and they ended up taking the 2 others. The fascists are kind of happy about this because they're at war with both of the powers that have an additional area, so maybe they can take something, at least from the Russians. Let's see what happens here. Because we're entering into the conflict stage, and this too is going to be done in turn order. So to grab a couple of actions, the US capitalists played a capitalism card in the US. They can do that without paying a distance penalty, and it doesn't affect the there's no defensive bonus that the communists have. So they were able to boot the economic influence that the communists had in the US. Now, the communists could have played a card to deflect that, but they didn't have one. Then we go to the fascists, and they have a lot of cards and not a lot to do. They're at war with the communists, so they're going to play 2 cards to do a military attack. They need the extra one because of the distance penalty, and they're going to do that against Alaska. They're going to use the lightning strike, which means the opponent has to have 2 military influence to deflect it. They only have 1 card, so obviously they can't have 2, which means this communist military influence in Alaska is gone, and now Alaska is still a neutral territory unless somebody does something about it. That somebody is not going to be the imperialists who go next. The Soviets, however, can do something. They can attack one of those. They have a military card. They could attack this, except there's a tactics card, and they have to match each tactics card that they're attacking with an additional military card as a penalty. So they can't go into Alaska. Can they do anything else? Are they next to anything else? They're not next to anything else in the game, so they're stuck sitting on this card. They can't use it. Finally, we go the Islamicists don't have anything to do, and then we wrap back around. I'll come back if anything exciting happens, but I don't think anything will. Okay, well, I'm right back because the capitalists go next, and they have an economic card that they love to play here against the imperialist economic influence in Cuba. Unfortunately, they cannot because they are at peace with the imperialists. So they can't do it. They can't make that attack. They can't attack anywhere else. They're not adjacent to anywhere else. Cuba's not adjacent to anything else. So they're kind of frozen. The Russians, we've already looked. They've got one card they could attack with. They can't use it. Let's look at the fascists. They're holding a couple of cards, but what do they control that they can do anything with? They can't play any of these because they have no bonus in terms of getting into an area. And everything's not adjacent to them. Their only adjacencies aren't in the game yet. So again, everybody's kind of stymied, holding cards maybe that aren't that useful. One of the reasons is you want to be able to compete in any new areas that come up, but you may not be able to get them. So now we'll go to the diplomacy phase, and then the assessments phase. We're not going to see a lot changing in the assessments phase. We'll see the imperialists and the jihad, the Islamicists, to go forward, improving their home areas to 4s. But as far as things stand, the communists are not going to get Alaska because it's split 3 ways. So the big question is, how does the diplomatic fallout from this turn come? So let me put some markers down. This is where we're going to be. Global influence is a 4 for the imperialists and for the Islamicists. What happened here? Well, the Islamicists tried to make peace with everyone. The capitalists said, we're good at economic competition. We want to be strictly neutral with everyone. So that didn't pass. But it did fix, they also downgraded how they felt towards the imperialists. But they did manage to come to a peace agreement with the communists. Communists wanted them to go to war with fascists. The capitalists were not unwilling, but their isolationism prevents them from declaring war. Now, I think that isolation is, the way the rules are stated, I think that isolationism would have prevented them from staying at war with the communists had the communists wanted peace and the capitalists not. I'm not sure, it's not really clear in the rules, but because the way this is worded, you may not declare war. Well, there's already an existing war. That's kind of how someone might try to rules lawyer it or whatever. And I'm not really sure which is the intention of the game. But the way the rules are worded, it seems like you're declaring a new war each time. Okay. Again, not absolutely clear. I get to rearrange these. United States is at 4, fascism is at 4. Imperialists are at 4, communists are not, but the Islamicists are. So now the communists will be going last. Everyone else is tied, and we're already seeing this kind of falling behind of communism here. Okay, so I guess we're on to the next turn. Okay, so right now we're in the development phase, and the U.S. has just played an economic development which will improve their hold on Cuba and improve by meaning that they have 5 influence there, and it's going to increase their value there. At this point, the imperialists say, I don't want the U.S. or the capitalists to be getting an advantage off my card there. So I'm going to discard my economic influence in Cuba because I can't take it easily at this point. There will be better things to fight over, and I'd rather just refuse them an advantage by my having a card there. That's a powerful option. I went through everyone else. So now we're at the foreign phase, and we get to see what the new country is. And it's going to be Mongolia, which is adjacent again to Russia. Another bonus for Russia. Russia is big. What goes into Russia? Look! Big continent of Australia. It go into Russia. Okay. Anyway. 3CP1 Television Moscow. So, we're in the foreign phase, and I'm going to start with the U.S. and start seeing who wants to do what in terms of this, and maybe I'll pop in as interesting things happen. So far in the conflict phase, Mongolia ended up split. Imperialist, military, economic for the capitalists, and cultural for the communists. The imperialists came back with 2 cards to take the cultural element from Mongolia, and then the propaganda effect. No, they've got to pay another one. They couldn't go in there. Ooh, it's hard to attack them culturally. So, do they have another? No, they don't. So they couldn't go in there. So anyway, the imperialists are there. I was trying to look for a place where we could do a cultural attack without losing ground. Now we could take Alaska from the Russians, but I don't know how much that really helps. Alright, well, this card came in handy for Britain. Okay, so I don't know what I'm gonna do with the jihad yet. Attacking something that you don't get an obvious gain. So here, they would prevent this from going to the imperialists. But here, all they do is make it less interesting. So they probably want to pass, because there's nothing they can really take. They could hurt somebody, but they can't really help themselves. But now they found an opportunity. The communists played 2 military cards to boot the fascists out. Now, they didn't have to pay a penalty for distance, but they did have to pay a penalty for the tactics card that the fascists held. And at this point, the Islamists say, I'm going to use my jihad to make it cheaper, since the communists have no cards and can't defend themselves, to boot them out of Alaska. And that prevents anybody from getting Alaska. Good, bad, hard to tell, but they would rather keep it in balance because that makes it more possible for them to go in there. Now, they would love if they could go in there with the cultural. That brings it back to Russia, U.S., and now the imperialists who really can't use this. Back to our jihadists who say, oh, if I was only at war with Russia. Now, I could become at war with Russia by discarding a military influence card, but then I don't have enough cards to go take Alaska. Well, that's a shame. And then we go to Russia, and nobody has been able to do anything, right? The fascists. Oh wait, we skipped the fascists here. The fascists have 2 cards. They can do a cultural attack, and clearly they want to do that. They're going to make an attack on Alaska. They're allowed to do cultural. You can always do cultural. The jihadists have no cards that can defend them, so they are booted. And you see how the dynamics changes on each one, and you may want to hold cards rather than play them right away. But if you hold and no one else has anything to do and everybody else passes and they're happy, well, then you're stuck holding a handful of cards. Alright, so the fascists just went. Let's go back here. They have nothing they can do. Economics is actually, they have no strong point at all here. Patriotism is a defensive card. So we go to the Islamicists, who hold the military card, but again, they can't use it against anyone. They aren't quite close enough to Mongolia. to invade. So they're going to have to pass with a handful of cards, even though they did some things at least. And now we go to the communists, they can't do anything. And as we wrap around, we see this turn is over there, and we're ready to go into the diplomacy phase again. Not much changed in diplomacy. The jihadists considered going against the imperialists here, and actually taking them to war, because they're holding a couple of war cards. They think that's kind of cool, but there's nothing they really want to attack that's out there right away. They can always use their bonus if it comes around to that. They're going to hold off. So, what do we go to? Well, the U.S. is still solidly desiring to remain isolationist as they are. The fascists and communists, the communists said, hey, I'll go to peace because, at least neutrality, because I just want to take one of these two, right? And the fascists said, nah, I don't think so. I think we stay at war, because that may be the best option for me to get control of this, rather than getting a triple set and being able to force you out, the way we saw with the capitalists in Cuba. Okay, so we go to the assessment phase. What happens here? Well, not a lot. Cuba didn't advance. No one else played in their home areas. And home areas are kind of tough to play in. It's nice to have the extra cards by advancing. But if you don't advance, and the thing is, these are territories that you're liable to keep control of because you have so many cards in them. So there's not much value to that. So we see an allocation here, though, where Alaska becomes fascist and Mongolia swings over to join the imperialist faction. Okay. And that changes our point values slightly, so our turn valuation changes. Where did that go? Well, let's see. Green is where it is, and it's sitting at 4. Fascism, they beat them. They're at 5 now. Okay. Imperialism also beat them. They're at 5. And everything stays the same beyond that. So there's our new turn order. And we go to another turn, and I'm going to load this one up for you.